All right, so this presentation is a little different from the others in that it's not really an example of how you can become an instructor or a coach or a rigger or anything like that in skydiving. But this presentation is really about safety, which covers all of skydiving, obviously, but particularly if you have some kind of rating, whether that is rigging or tandem or AFF or anything like that. We first gave this presentation 3 years ago, I think it was, at the Simpson Safety Day, which is usually where we're based. And our chief instructor, we said we were going to do a presentation about normalized deviance. He thought that we were referring to his behaviour in terms of being deviant, but that was just a misunderstanding. And we will talk about what normalized deviance is in a minute. We then did it again at Safety Day online last year, which had to be over Zoom because COVID, and it wasn't quite as impactful, I think, and you'll see why maybe in a minute. We've got a little video to watch. We're going to have to do a bit of messing around with the stuff there, so bear with us. But let's crack on. So we called this presentation "When an Accident is Not an Accident," or normalized deviance and how to avoid it in skydiving. We went through all this earlier on, and I think everyone who saw it earlier on is still here, but I just wanted to call out my background in health and safety in relation to many different industries, but also that's very applicable to skydiving. So normalized deviance, does anyone know what normalized deviance is? Has anyone come across the term either in skydiving or work outside of skydiving? No? It's not a common phrase, but we want it to be. We want it to become part of the vernacular that we use and that we are aware of in skydiving, but in all aspects that involve an element of safety. So the definition of normalized deviance, which was coined by Diane Vaughan in 1996, and we'll talk a bit more about her in a minute. But the definition is a process where a clearly unsafe practice becomes to be considered normal if it does not immediately cause a catastrophe. And people within an organisation, or in this case skydiving, become so much accustomed to the deviation that they don't even consider it deviant, despite the fact that they far exceeded their own rules of elementary safety. So it's about departures from our own levels, our own imposed levels of safety, but almost the deliberate departure from it, because the immediate deviation didn't cause a disaster. That will become more clear what we mean in a minute.
There were, as there had been on this and past shuttle missions, delays this morning. This time it was Florida's freezing snap. There were icicles on the launch gantry, and there was a 2-hour delay until NASA officials were satisfied there was no danger. The family of Krista McAuliffe, the first teacher, the first private citizen to be chosen for a space flight, watched the launch.
And liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Now controlling.
Roger, roll, Challenger.
Good, roll program confirmed. Challenger now heading downrange.
For a whole minute, the launch went as planned.
Engines beginning throttling down now at 94%. Normal throttles for most of the flight, 104%. We'll throttle down to 65% shortly. Engines at 65%, 3 engines running normally, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good APUs. Velocity 2,257 feet per second. Altitude 4.3 nautical miles. Downrange distance 3 nautical miles.
Mission Control gave the command for the last burst of power to kick Challenger into space.
Engines throttling up. 3 engines now at 104%.
Challenger, go at throttle up.
Challenger, go at throttle up. One minute, 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
All that was left were the contrails of the bits and pieces of Challenger.
Obviously a major malfunction.
For 45 minutes, rescue craft couldn't get near the debris because pieces of Challenger were still falling from the sky. On the ground, shock. Macaulay's parents, Edward and Grace Corrigan. It quickly became clear that no one had survived.
I regret that I have to report that based on very preliminary searches of the ocean where the Challenger impacted this morning, these searches have not revealed any evidence that the crew of Challenger survived.
NASA rejected suggestions that the mission had been rushed to avoid the embarrassment of further delays.
There was absolutely no pressure to get this particular launch off. We have always maintained that flight safety is our top priority consideration in the program, and we look at the status and readiness of the systems based on that. We thoroughly reviewed the activities over the weekend and yesterday, and continually reviewed the status of Challenger right up until launch this morning. All of the people involved in this program, to my knowledge, felt that Challenger was quite ready to go, and I made the decision, along with the recommendation from the team supporting me, that we launch.
Over the years, we've learned to take venturing into space almost for granted. The very choice of Krista McAuliffe symbolized that. She was the first ordinary folks to be chosen to go into space. If she could go, why not the rest of us? Today we found out that it isn't that easy. Today we learned the real cost of trying to conquer space. Joe Schlesinger, CBC News, Cape Canaveral, Florida.
So the chap says, Rebecca says, Mission Control says, there's obviously been a major malfunction. A major malfunction. Immediately everyone thought something huge has gone wrong with this mission. Everyone is dead. They know it instantly, and it's on live television. Caused the death of all 7 astronauts. And do you know the worst thing? They didn't die instantly. They didn't die in that. It wasn't an explosion. That's gases that you see. They died when their pod hit the water. So they didn't die immediately.
No, they knew all this had gone wrong.
So what caused the Challenger disaster then? Some kind of huge malfunction, something unforeseen? Surely, this is NASA. Nothing could happen accidentally, surely. So what actually caused it was a design flaw, which they knew about, in one of the O-rings on the solid rocket launch booster. So they have 4 boosters. There was like a gasket that allowed expansion and contraction in the boosters that allowed that to happen with heat without anything happening. However, they knew about that flaw. They knew that that could break, particularly in cold weather, because it had never been tested at that temperature. Coldest day in Florida ever. They'd seen damage before, but they launched anyway. Why? Normalized deviance.
So it's important to understand the physical cause is different from the behavioural cause. They knew about the physical cause. They weren't aware of this at the time. Let's see how it happens. So this is just a bit more of a detailed explanation of this thing that Victoria's talking about, the O-rings. So the area of deviance is the O-rings, and they observed damage on a #1 criticality component, and that meant with their own standard operating procedures, if they saw any damage on a #1 criticality component, that meant that it could result in the loss of the entire ship and the death of all the astronauts on board. So they knew this. So what they told themselves, it's not caused a major issue before. This is when they first saw damage on an O-ring. Damage is noted on Flight 2, but it didn't cause a problem. We pressure tested damaged O-rings on the ground, and it was fine. As long as we see no more damage than we did on Flight 2, it's all right. They were under time pressure. They had reputational risk concerns. NASA had promised Congress and the American public 26 flights a year, and grounding the fleet was not financially practical. Why is it a problem? So each of these risks, as they're being raised, is being minimised or ignored to the point where they're now expecting to see damage on a #1 criticality component, which, let's remind ourselves, could cause the loss of the entire fleet and the deaths of all the astronauts on board. But they're now expecting to see it. You can't really see this in this light. The normal outcome, which is circled here, the normal outcome of having a damaged O-ring is nothing. 14 flights were completed with damaged O-rings, and nothing bad happened.
The potential impact of launching a shuttle with the damaged O-rings is minor damage to the shuttle or the solid rocket booster. I can't read that. The potential high impact, which is this third column here, is fairly obviously the death of every astronaut on board and the loss of the ship. Each time something doesn't go wrong, all these things, the 11 flights that they saw it on, each time something doesn't go wrong, the false feedback loop is reinforced and the behaviours are deemed safer. So just to remind ourselves, every time they did something that had already deviated from a number one criticality component, every time something didn't go wrong when they flew like it, they convinced themselves that that behaviour was safer. So I guess the question for us then, was Challenger really an accident? So the definition of an accident, it's an unfortunate incident that happens unexpectedly and unintentionally, typically resulting in damage or injury. An event that happens by chance or that is without apparent or deliberate cause. So was it an accident or a predictable surprise? I think we can all say that was not an accident. It was not unexpected and it wasn't unintentional. They knew that this could be the risk and they did it on purpose anyway. It wasn't a chance incident and there was a deliberate cause, albeit that was a site. They didn't deliberately do it, but they deliberately went past their own safe operating standards. How might it apply in skydiving, which is obviously why we're here? So just as a reminder of the definition of normalized deviance, it's a process where a clearly unsafe practice comes to be considered normal if it does not immediately cause a catastrophe. And people within an organisation, or in this case a sport, become so much accustomed to the deviation that they don't consider it deviant, despite the fact that they far exceeded their own rules of elementary safety. All right, do you want to do this bit? So I can't really see this table very well because it's a bit light in here, but I bet if we just think about the extrapolation of that into skydiving, think of some things that we do all the time that we know we shouldn't really do, but we do it because it doesn't really cause a problem most of the time. How do you go forward? The spacebar. Okay. So let's think of an area of deviance in skydiving, a lack of a formal dive plan. How many people jump out the plane, free flyers, thinking, we'll just make it up when we get into the air. You be the base, you go to the base, giving the lightest person the job of being the base, meaning immediately you're out of the plane, something's gone wrong. It happens less in four-way because we like structure. But in a lot of skydives, it's just mates diving out, yeah? It's just friends, let's just get into free fall and have a laugh, yeah? That would be brilliant. What we tell ourselves, it's always been fine before, we're all experienced skydivers. Plans are for four-way geeks, it's true. It stops us having fun, we'll just track away high. Like, if it all goes wrong, let's all just track away high. Why is that a problem? We all know why it's a problem, but we don't really think about it. But it's a problem because it's unpredictable behaviour. And in skydiving, unpredictability is dangerous. Different break-off and pull height, how is that going to affect not only people in your group, but the group before and afterwards? Suddenly you're affecting multiple people on the plane because your group didn't have a dive plan. You could have collisions in free fall, collisions under canopy, all because you thought it would be just fun just to meet up in free fall and do your thing. So what's the normal outcome of that? Nothing. You have a fun skydive and you land. The false feedback loop is starting now. You've all done it, me included. We've got a false feedback loop thinking that if we don't have a dive plan, it's safe. What's the potential low impact of not having a dive plan? Near miss or close call. How many people have opened near other people under canopy because they tracked away a bit high because it was all going wrong, and most people have had a close call either in free fall or under canopy. But the worst outcome is death. So you having no dive plan, because it went okay most of the time, could result in death. Serious injury. Or serious injury. So what else? How about no flight line checks or not checking other people? This happens abroad a lot because you're not mandated to check people. Even in the UK, we're like, everyone okay? Yeah, we're all okay. We do it. We know we do it. I do it too, but I do think about it and I check myself when I think about myself doing it. So abroad, there's no requirement to check each other. So what we tell ourselves, we think, well, my kit's fine. No one ever really checks me. I'm an AFF instructor. I check people. People don't check me. I know what I'm looking at, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, your kit's fine. Let's go. The plane is waiting. The CI is shouting at me, get on the plane, it's turning. So we go past our imposed safety standard, which is a check at flight line. So why is that a problem? So it's a missed opportunity to spot kit errors. I've caught people on the plane with chest straps not done up, on the plane, with the door open. It prevents accidents and incidents. It's also in contravention of the ops manual. We are obliged to have flight line checks. So what's the normal outcome of no one checking your kit? Nothing. Doesn't matter, we got away with it.
False feedback loop.
Yeah, so the false feedback loop is starting. So the potential low impact is incorrectly configured kit. You'd probably survive it, it'd probably be all right. The AAD might be off on an A-licensed student, you hadn't, A-licensed skydiver because you hadn't visually checked it, they're an A-license. They don't really know, that's why we have the visual check there. And we got away with it. Or we noticed that our leg strap was flapping in free fall, but we got away with it. There was no real impact. But what's the potential impact of that? Serious injury or death. So not having a flight line check, the potential impact is serious injury or death. Just because it hasn't been before doesn't mean it won't be next time. Not wearing a restraint in the plane. Everyone not wearing a restraint in the plane. Someone behind you picked up two in front of you, now the plane's starting to move and everyone's clipped in, there's tandems, they can't move. So we take off without a seatbelt. We've all done it, we've all done it. We tell ourselves it's never been a problem before. Peer pressure is a very difficult one to overcome on the plane. Someone behind you, Johnny 2000 jumps, has got your restraint. You're an A-licensed skydiver. Do you tell them, excuse me, Johnny 2000 jumps, can I have your seatbelt, please? Nah, just don't say anything. No one will notice I've not got a restraint on. It'll be fine. It's a problem because jumpers are not restrained during aircraft moving. Even if it's not an emergency, even if another plane comes into land and they put the brakes on, you're still going to move. If there's an aircraft emergency, God forbid, during takeoff, you're not strapped in. You're suddenly a ballistic missile in the middle of the plane, which is also why we attach our helmets. You're also in convention of the BPS, the British Skydiving Ops Manual, by the way, not wearing a restraint if the plane has them. Normal outcome, nothing. I've been on a plane tons of times without a restraint, nothing happened. Potential low impact, you get a bit squashed, you might slide forward a little bit, nothing really. But what is the potential impact, which you all know by now? Injury or death, not wearing a restraint, that is the potential impact. And just because it's been fine every other time doesn't mean it's going to be fine this time. Final one, not spotting. Green on. No idea where we are over the ground, none. But the pilot doesn't get it wrong because he's got GPS now, so it's fine. Green means go. These days, we know the landing area is massive. You can land everywhere. I'm shit hot on my canopy. I'm just going to land it anywhere. It doesn't really matter. I trust the pilot. Everyone else is shouting at me to get out, so I'm just going to get out. I'm first, so anyway, it's fine for me. We'll just screw everyone else. Why is it a problem? Lack of awareness and personal responsibility. Take responsibilities, not just the jump master that's responsible for people's safety on the plane. We all are. Again, you're in contravention of the ops manual by not spotting. Normal impact, nothing.
False feedback loop
False
starts.
feedback loop starts, yeah. Potential low impact, off landing, hindering the operation. You have to shut down while the drop zone comes to look for you, whatever. Minor injury, maybe twist your ankle because you landed in a rutted field because you didn't check the spot.
Oops,
But as we all know, the possible impact is injury or death, serious injury or death from not spotting. So on this one load, you could have done all of those things, quite likely to have. We're now contravening 4 of the basic things that we need to do on every load. So by not doing even one of these things, you are risking injury or death. Imagine doing all of them. All right, so I guess we've spoken enough about normalized deviance that we all know what that is now, right? It's moving away from our own understood baselines of safety and almost deliberately doing so because each time we do so, it hasn't proven catastrophic. So our brains are tricked into thinking that it's safer, even though it clearly isn't. So how do we avoid succumbing to it? Recognize that we're all susceptible to it. That's the biggest one. Understanding that it exists and recognizing that we're all susceptible to it.
And the more experienced you are, the worse it is.
Yeah, and the more experienced you are, the worse you can suffer from it because you're more likely to have done the unsafe thing more. Be aware of the false feedback loop, and if that wasn't clear enough before, which I'm sure it was, but the false feedback loop starts every time you contravene your own or British skydiving safety standards. That's when the false feedback loop starts, when nothing went wrong because of it. Okay, so this is our own little acronym. British Skydiving loves acronyms. This is ours, proud. Systematic, so follow the correct process for the situation every single time. Just because you did it wrong before doesn't mean it's going to be safe if you do it again. Never deviate away from your own or imposed safety baseline. Attention to detail, be absolutely clinical in your approach. This is clearly important if you're an instructor, but it's just as important for your own safety and others, the safety of others on the drop zone. Look for deviations, expect to see them. And trust your instinct. We've probably all been on that load, right, where we always like to think there's someone on every load that's trying to kill you. Spot who that person is. If you can't, maybe it's you. So trust your instincts. If something doesn't look right or doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. Face facts, so consistently assess the situation. Perhaps the weather's changed, perhaps the level of experience of people you're jumping with has changed, and be present in the moment. And be an example. Lead from the front, particularly if you're an instructor. Be fanatical about your safety and the safety of yourself and others. Be courageous in challenging normalized deviance when you see other people suffering from it. And if you're not brave enough, go find an instructor that is brave, that will come and challenge it. I will. If you've come find me, if you see something, I'll speak to someone. Vic will too. And learn from mistakes and near misses. So if you land from a jump and think, I got away with that time, take that as a learning opportunity and make sure that you don't go through that again. That's it. We've spoken quite at you for like half an hour. So I think hopefully that's really clear about what normalized deviance is, how we can suffer from it and how we can avoid it. The biggest way to avoid it is to understand that it exists. Do you have any questions about any of that? What questions do you have? Any?
They don't ask.
Don't ask, yeah. We're not really this serious on the drop zone, honestly. We wanted to leave the presentation with the pictures of these 7 astronauts that died that day on Challenger. I think it's a real shame that we couldn't get the sound on that video because it's, as skydivers, it's so impactful to see. We've all seen videos of people having fun on the ground. We've seen boogie edits. We've seen families of people. Everyone's having a great time. Until you don't, because something's gone wrong. And that's unfortunately what happened with these 7 astronauts here. And they lost their lives that day because of normalized deviance. And that is why we're trying to implore you to understand that it exists and to avoid it happening in every skydive you'll run. That's it.